I thought though that gallery scene had kind of maxed out a couple years ago, but a lot of alternative galleries have opened up there in recent years, and it helped. You know what it means to have, let's say, a cheaper space is that you can exhibit work that's more experimental. Because if you have a gallery in Chelsea, you know, I sympathize with those galleries. They do a very good job with what they have, but they have very high rent. And with that, you have to sell paintings of a certain, or artwork of a certain price. And because of that, you're dependent on the market and the market taste. It's very hard to lead taste when you are dependent on the market to even put the lights on in your gallery. What's nice about, let's say, what happens at Bushwick or other venues like it is, you know, a lot of times the gallery might be your own apartment. You know, there's very little overhead, next to no overhead. Artists will have second jobs. They don't necessarily depend on the income from their artwork. New York allows them to do that. Artists out here work very hard to make that happen, but they do, and because of that, you get scenes like Bushwick or the Lower East Side. You know, it's funny, it's going to be, I can just see how, you know, you look back on this 5 years from now, we're going to say, oh my God, Bushwick was an alternative scene. Bushwick will probably one day look a lot like Soho does now, in my opinion, if things continue going the way they're going to go. And the artists will be, who knows where, Ridgewood. I have these conversations all the time. You know, where are you going to go from here? Artists need space. They need bigger space than most other people because of the size of their production. You know, where are there abandoned warehouses? Whatever there are, and you get the artists out there in the transportation, as you have with the L train, you're going to potentially get an artist community. It's actually what happened, as I say, in Montparnasse in around 1910. You had artists who were in Montmartre, in the northern part of Paris, an old town in the northern part of Paris, and you had a subway line run north to south, open right around that time. And all of a sudden, a new neighborhood, this Montparnasse neighborhood, opened up. It wasn't much to look at. It wasn't that picturesque, but it had a lot of space, and it had a concentration of cafes right at this intersection. And that became the hub of the art world for decades because of that. It just had the right ingredients. You had transportation, you had a place for the artists to get together, you had studios, like one was called the Beehive. It was just filled with artists, floor to ceiling. That's where Chagall worked, for example. And you know, art is often best generated when artists are in a beehive. So wherever you see that happening, as with Soho, Bushwick, that seems to be where the real innovation occurs. I mean, there's a parallel you can see with the way, like, say, Silicon Valley operates, and you have a concentration of engineers all in one place. You know, artists are a little bit like innovative engineers, and the innovation rubs off on one to the other. Picasso is someone who really understood that. You know, the reason he moved from Spain to Paris is because he was an incredibly good sponge for other people's styles. He would take other people's styles and he would make them a little better, give them his own stamp, and then he owned them. And, you know, artists borrow, artists steal. He understood what that all meant. And if you follow where Picasso went, he was in Montmartre, you know, and then he went to Montparnasse right at the right moment, around 1910, and continued to develop there. And so I would say, if you're an artist, pay attention to your location. You know, you gotta be around other artists. You gotta be out there seeing these shows. I know a lot of artists, and I'm always encouraging them, go out to the openings. It's not just what happens in the studio. And it's easy to forget that fact. But, you know, when artists create these communities, and they create an energy that feeds off of one another, and it's a very positive energy. I think an artist who just sits in the studio all day long, alone, it can get quite oppressive. You going to 23rd Street?
Yeah.
23rd and what?
10th.
Okay, no problem. So what else did you want to cover?
Well, we've kind of covered quite a bit.
let me mention. Well, you said you read my article about the museum culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can talk about that for a little bit.
Actually, you know what I kind of found. What I found interesting is I was reading one of your articles, and there was actually quite a bit of humor in it.
Oh.
There was like, you know, there was the seriousness, and then there was the humor in it with it, because you were mentioning that you only had 800 words to do this in, and you're like, oh, okay, now I've only got this many left, so I might as well, you know, get down to really talking about that.
Well, I think, look, that's probably my journalism side coming out. I really make a point of writing for a general audience, general to an extent, you know, where I'm not just writing for a peer group. I see the type of journalism, the type of criticism I'm doing is expanding out a worlds of art, and you know, and you gotta look at your reader. You gotta keep your reader somewhat entertained. There's something wrong with that. I gotta keep myself entertained. I'm not an academic. Academics do not have to worry about keeping people interested. But frankly, if you can't keep people interested, nothing's going to happen. What you're doing, you're just going to write to a vacuum. And so, you know, I make an effort to make my criticism readable. And you know, I write for different venues. You know, I write for New Criterion. I write for the Wall Street Journal. I write a variety of type of pieces. I write about urban policy in addition to art criticism. And I think all those practices are, you know, very beneficial to me because they kind of feed off one another. You know, having to think about, let's say, how artists exist in a city for, let's say, an urban policy point of view helps me understand the criticism and the artwork I'm seeing on the flip side. But I appreciate you think my writing's funny. I try. Usually what happens is these, you know, it's these late nights and things start to seem really funny to me as I'm writing the piece at like 2 a.m. that, you know, I probably wouldn't have put in if it was the middle of the day. But, you know, I guess that's when the magic happens, right?
Yeah.
I think what also you can see is I like to write about artwork. You know, I like to write about these scenes. I try to reflect that interest and enthusiasm in the pieces I'm writing. Well, we'll be right on time for you.
Okay.
Good. But in terms of, you know, I did write this piece called What's a Museum last year. And I'm someone who loves museum culture. I love going to museums. You know, I love the Museum of Natural History, which is close to our house. We go to the Metropolitan many weekends. My concern is that the kind of traditional ideas of museums, what they are, is being professionalized and turned into big business. You have a museum industrial complex that's rising up. And, you know, just like how, let's say, the Chelsea galleries have to be beholden to the marketplace, I'm worried when museums also become businesses, non-profit businesses, that are dependent on their ticket take, blockbuster exhibitions, or even worse, you know, taking artwork that's in their collection and selling it for profit, or to roll it into artwork that they want to buy. In my opinion, that goes against the very nature of the trust that people put in our museums. You know, we have very high trust for our museums still, and that says a lot because we don't trust a lot of other institutions anymore. But so I would hate to see that erode. And you want to take a nap? You really? What do you want me to do? You want me to? Well, you want to take a nap right now?
I was and taking up outside.
All right. What if I stop talking? Would that be good? Maybe play some music?